I found myself in those beginning stages of practicing breath work, just really, really releasing so much, just in the form of, I was really angry. I was really angry at first. And I was able to allow a lot of those feelings to surface and to either scream or yell or cry or whatever it was I needed to do to release those feelings so that they weren't, because trauma gets trapped in our bodies.
Hello, and welcome to Grief, Gratitude, and the Gray in Between podcast. This podcast is about exploring the grief that occurs at different times in our lives, in which we have had major changes and transitions that literally shake us to the core and make us experience grief. I created this podcast for people to feel a little less hopeless and alone in their own grief process as they hear the stories of others who have had similar journeys. I'm Kendra Rinaldi, your host. Now, let's dive right into today's episode. Hello, and thank you so much for tuning in today. Today, you will be listening to Andrea Freemyer's story and her journey. Andrea reached out to me via email that she wanted to be a guest and share her story and shared a little bit about what had happened in her life. And I was intrigued myself of her own journey. And I know that all of you listeners will be intrigued as well. And so, Andrea, welcome so much to the podcast.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
I'm so glad you're here. And did I say welcome so much? Is that what I just said right before? Did I say welcome so much?
I
Isn't
don't
that weird?
know.
Whatever it is, I said. I was telling Andrea, I'm like, usually where I like mess up the most is probably when I'm introducing people, and I probably just messed up right there. I'm like, did I just say like
welcome
welcome so much? Welcome so
welcome
much.
so much works,
Is it? Is it
it's
proper
lots of
English?
welcome.
Lots of welcome. Lots of welcome. And that's the thing. I try to make this be so lighthearted because a lot of times, of course, this subject of grief is so heavy that
Yeah.
a lot of times we need to kind of, include a little bit of that lightness to it. And humor and so forth too, for me at
Yes.
least. If not, I don't think I could be interviewing 3 to 4 people a week on the subject if I didn't add a little bit of that sense of humor as well in the process of lightness to it. So, but anyway, I'm so glad that you are here. And we just chatted just like briefly, like 5 minutes right before we started recording. So I'm going to be finding out all these details pretty much with the listeners as well. So how about we start with just very basics? Where do you live?
I live in Kansas City, Kansas, so kind of
I know.
right in the middle
I,
of.
I always ask that when people say Kansas City, Missouri or Kansas? Kansas City,
Yeah.
Missouri or Kansas? Which one of the two?
Yeah, it's so funny because I have lived on the Missouri side for so long, and now I'm on the Kansas side, but I'm literally like 3 houses on the Kansas side. So so
That's so
that
funny.
that divider line is very real around here.
And are people very much like, I've never been there. I've never been to Kansas City, but my husband has for work. But do you know, is it like kind of like the West Side Story kind of thing, like you know what I mean, the
Yeah,
sharks and the
kind of.
jets type of feeling?
Yes. Yeah,
Are you from the
kind of.
Missouri side or the Kansas?
Yeah, there's definitely people that get
Oh.
offended when you're like, "Oh, yeah, I've never been to Kansas." And they're like, "No, actually, I'm from Missouri. Thank you very much." I'm
The
not really,
correction
it
right
doesn't really matter to me,
there.
but.
So that's where you live. Is that where you grew up as well?
I have lived back and forth through from like Western Kansas to the Kansas City area, both Kansas City, Kansas and Missouri. So, um, not all of my
So
life, but I've been here for like the past 12 years. So
okay.
we've been here for a while.
Okay, so yeah, that's your home right now. If you feel
Yes.
like that's going to be your home for a little while. You have a son we were just talking about, and he is again how old?
He's 5.
He's five.
Yes.
So now is that a big deal too of choosing where you live based on like the school districts and all that as your child starts getting into that age of the schools? Does that make a big difference too in that area?
Yes, yes, it definitely does, and that's definitely something we're going to have to revisit when that time comes. So he should be starting kindergarten, in August of this year, which is crazy to think about. Um, but yeah, so that's definitely something that we need to figure out. Just trying to
That's
take it a day at a time, though.
yes. Now, what did you go to school? Did you go to school for before we go into what you're doing now? Did you go to college, all that kind
Yeah.
of stuff, and get a degree? What did you get your degree on when you went to school?
Yes. So my undergraduate degree is in psychology. And I also have a PhD in neuroscience. So I have just kind of
Ooh,
been I spent a lot of years trying to understand better what goes on in mental illness and kind of like what's the underlying things that are happening in the brain when,
so interesting.
yeah.
Because now I'm going to be asking you a lot of how that played a part then in your own journey then with grief, because then you
Yeah.
have the academic component of
Hmm.
everything and the psychology and the neuroscience
Yeah.
and this, and then it's suddenly something happens in your own life that then it's like, do you analyze things or do you feel them? So I'm so curious
Yeah.
as to how that went. So take us then into what your grief journey is. Let's go into your life. So take us into your relationship and then we'll go from there.
All right. So I'm just gonna kind of start with just kind of how my growth, my own like personal growth journey started, and
Love it.
my story through grief and through what happened will kind of weave in there.
Perfect. I love that.
So I have spent lots of years of my life as a high functioning perfectionist, and overachiever, just needing to do all of the things. And in my younger adult years, I went through some really painful experiences in my personal life with my family, and really just did everything I could to avoid feeling those feeling the pain of those things. And that's when I really threw myself into getting this advanced education. My father struggled with anxiety and depression, and it really disrupted my everything that I knew to be like the family dynamic that I had grown up in. And so that's really why when I went to college, I chose psychology. I'm like, I'm going to figure this out. Like, how can I help him? How can I, like, what can I do? How, like, why did he change? And just trying to understand
Mhm.
the ins and outs of that. So I threw myself into education, and additionally, I numbed the hurt, I numbed the pain with either just distracting and overworking and throwing myself into school, or with drinking and some recreational drugs.
Mhm.
And but on the outside, I had it all together. It appeared like I was doing all of the right things, but inside I was hurting deeply. And most of my moments were spent really just caught up in the chaos of my mind, with my ego. My ego was the star of the show. And then during my graduate training, my personal life went through a lot of transformations. So that is when I met who would become my husband, and we got married. We bought a house and we had a baby all within the span of a year. And simultaneously, I was in graduate school. And so there was just a lot going on. And throughout this whole process of me trying to avoid all the previous pain of the circumstances in my life, um, I had just kind of lost myself. And becoming a mother was
Mhm.
really a pivotal moment in my life, where I had started the process of what I call my awakening, where I really just knew like things need to change. Like I need to do something here. Um, and so that's when I really began the journey into personal and self development. But again, I was consuming all the content, reading all the books. I started to commit to my health and wellness and practicing meditation daily. And it became clear to me that I had really spent so much of my life running and avoiding myself, avoiding
Mm.
stillness, just really disconnected from my body. And so things had started to shift at that point, but I had a long road ahead of me. And then on September 16th of 2019 was when really just the very foundation of my life had crumbled. I had discovered um, my husband's lifeless body in our garage after he had taken his own life. So I we had been together for 7 years, married for 5. At this time had a 4-year-old son together, and our marriage was for the last year of our marriage, it was really challenging, really difficult. And he struggled with anxiety and depression, had his own battles going on. And I really struggled with my previous wounds related to that, of like not feeling like I could help my father. And then I was married to this person, not feeling like I could help him or reach him. And so when this became my reality, I was completely broken open. I was raw. I was exposed. And I really, in that moment in my life, was like, how am I going to move forward? Like, how could I ever work through this and process this trauma? How can I exist in my new reality?
Mm.
And for me, in those early stages, after it happened, I turned to nature. I anchored myself in nature. It's something I had always been really drawn to. I'd always had a deep connection, just felt at home and at peace when I was outside. But I really anchored onto this to be held, to ground to this thing that was so much bigger than me.
Mm.
And it was and then I had made the difficult decision to leave my son for a week. So this was just about a month after my husband's death. I had previous plans to attend a conference in San Diego for completely different reasons than what I ended up getting out of it. Um, but that so a month later, that time had come, and I was like, what should I go, should I stay, like what I was very much like trying to figure that
Torn.
out.
Mm-hmm.
And I ultimately, after much going back and forth, decided to go. And I am so grateful that I did, because that's where I was exposed to breath work. um I was still in those like super early, still very much in shock from everything that had gone on. But when I was guided through this breathwork session, I felt this deep connection with my body, and it was like nothing I could explain with words. And I really got to a point where I was doing the breathing exercise, and I was like, I don't know if I can do this. This doesn't feel safe. I don't feel comfortable, because again, I was so raw and so exposed, and everything was so fresh. But I had just enough awareness to know, like, I just need to go outside and ground myself. And so that's what I did. But what I got from that, just that sip of that feeling, that deep connection with my body, was that I knew that this was something that I had been craving for so long.
Mm.
I had the education, I had um the understanding of like what the academic understanding of like what happens when somebody struggles from a mental illness, what happens when we're just going through challenging times. And but what I didn't have was this connection with my body. I was so in my head all of the time, trying to figure my way through things, trying to like logically solve all the struggle and all the hurt that I saw all around me and even in within my own life. Um and so from that day, I just really, really discovered that this is what I needed. I needed a deep, loving connection with myself. And I had the realization as well that there was really nowhere else I could turn at this point in my life except for inward.
Mm. Wow, wow, wow. Okay, I want to
Yeah,
pause you. I want to pause you. Take a breath.
that was a lot. Yeah.
Since you study breath work, let's take a breath.
Yeah. Yes, let's do.
I Let's do that. Actually, guide me through that as I then I'm going to ask you some. So in through my nose and then exhale through my mouth, just like in yoga, kind of. Is that what I
Yeah,
would do
yeah,
right
we
now?
can
Okay,
do.
let's
That's
do a
what in
couple.
my practice we call the
Okay.
sigh breath. So if you just want to take a deep breath in through your nose and just let it out, just like with a big sigh. It's just really kind of a way to like gather all the stuck energy in our system and just let it all out. Yeah, we call
Thank you.
these just like cleansing. These are just
Cleansing
deep
breaths.
cleansing breaths.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So I want to pause you because I want to go back a little bit and ask you some things regarding how then, because you were feeling torn then in that month after his passing to go to this conference. Was the conference had to do with something with well-being as well, and that's where you found, was it like a vendors kind of conference of different types of
Yeah,
practices of well-being?
it was
That's
actually
what I
so I was
envisioned as you were saying. I was thinking yoga, thinking of like different types of things, but that then you found this particular thing. So that's why I was wondering what kind of conference it was.
yeah, actually it was unrelated to wellness in the
Oh,
bigger
really?
picture. Yeah.
Wow.
I went, it was a marketing conference, like for
And
kind of
then
like
how did you
how
find breath work
yeah.
there? That's what,
The
okay. So, because I'm like, oh, maybe it's in the well being space. And that then, like, one
mm-mm.
of the aspects of the conference was no. Oh, my
Yeah, and
goodness.
that's part of what that's one of the reasons why it's so crazy that like that I was going because I was kind of in the process of transitioning out of academia, like just because I wanted
Hmm.
to be home more. I didn't want there were certain stressors that came along with that job that I just was like, I just this just isn't in alignment
Hmm.
for me. And I was already kind of on that road transitioning out of that. And I was gonna be like a fitness coach.
Hmm.
I was very much into fitness and taking care, I said I had started to take care of myself. And so I'm like, maybe I can help people with this. And
Hmm.
so I went to this conference for to get some understanding of marketing and like starting my own business and all of these things. And the person who was putting on the conference happened to be friends with this woman who I found breathwork, who got up on stage and started talking. Her name's Samantha Scully. She got up on stage and started talking, and honestly, I knew she was going to be there, and I knew there was going to be this breathwork thing, but I was like, this is ridiculous. Like, I know how to breathe. Like what are we even doing? And so I wasn't super excited about that part of it, but that's what I got from this trip.
That's so interesting.
Yeah.
I love it. I love it because it was, yeah, like you said, completely unrelated. And yet here
Yes.
was this gift that then tied you back in, not only for your own journey, then to be able to navigate your own grief, then through breath, and also help you in this journey as one of your tools. But then also now something that you do so
Yeah.
for others. So it's just beautiful. My question then also, and by the way, thank you for sharing that, and it is a lot, and it's very recent. It's only a little bit past a year
Yeah.
since this happened as we're speaking, um and it's a lot. Not only were you dealing with grief, but I'm assuming there was some trauma as well related to finding
Yes.
your husband. So, did you in that moment seek for therapy or things like that at the beginning? Aside, what did you help yourself in that first month again before you discovered breath work? What were some of the other tools that you used to help you with your trauma and your grief in that first, few weeks of this traumatic event in your life?
Yeah. So we had actually been in couples therapy
Mm-hmm.
prior to his death. And so I continued to see that therapist, and also got my son into some
I was
play
going to ask
therapy
you.
with her
Mm-hmm.
as
Mm-hmm.
well. So I did that. And that was somewhat, for all things considered, a comfortable transition, just because she already knew me, she knew
Mm-hmm.
him, she knew our story. And so just to be able to go into that and just, reach out to somebody that already knew
Mm-hmm.
a little bit about our history was made it a little bit easier. It wasn't easy by
Mm-hmm.
any means, but it just the doors were already kind of open there.
Yes. Now,
And
what kind of language for yourself? Sorry, go ahead.
oh,
Continue. I don't
oh,
want to
and I was
interrupt your
just going to
train of
say, and then
thought.
the other things, like I said, I spent a lot of time outside. I spent a lot of
Mm-hmm.
time um, just being in nature and seeking the lessons that there are just all around us,
Mm-hmm.
and seeking comfort and like refuge in that, and also moving my body. I had this like morning routine that I I really anchored to that in those first. I mean, there was a while and some days where I just didn't feel like I could get up and move at all.
Mm-hmm.
And then there were other days where I was like, I have to do this. Like I have to get up and move my body. And obviously, being a mom and having my son, who is still very much dependent on me, being like, okay, I have to figure a way through this. I
Mm-hmm.
have to keep on taking care of myself, because not only do I need to be here for me, but I need to continue to show up for him. He's already
Mm-hmm.
lost his father. He can't lose me too.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
that was a
You're not
big
the first
driving
widow that I
force.
hear say that aspect of the not losing that your child not to lose um, their other parent as well in that process, and it's
Yeah.
that is something that I've heard, yeah, more than once, and it's amazing because it's true. It just makes you as as a person just have to pull through. I haven't lived it myself, but I just from having experienced, hearing other people that you just have to pull yourself through because again, it's not just about you and it's not about
Yeah.
just about you. Um, so in that journey, questions regarding how did you then talk to your son? What were the words at his age of 4? What words did you choose to use for what had happened to his dad? And
Mm,
I like I'm if it's and if it's not something you want to share, that's okay, but I think that sometimes it's important for parents to hear the type of maybe words, and sometimes maybe we go back and we're like, well, maybe I could have used something different.
yeah.
Maybe now thinking of it, I would have said it this way, but this is the best I had at that particular time of how could how I could explain what had happened. Was it you that explained it? Was it the therapist, or what words were used to explain
Yeah.
for a
So
4-year-old? Mm-hmm.
yeah. So it was me. I told him, and I told him that it was the next day, or like really it happened really early in the morning, so it was like that day, but hours later. And I took him on a walk, and I had talked to our therapist about it and kind of like, what do I say, because I
Mm-hmm.
had no idea. And she just said, just say it as plainly as and as simply as possible, and if he asks questions, just answer his questions, but you don't need to give like any more information than
Mm-hmm.
to like overcomplicate it. So I just told him, you know that that daddy died. And I just kind of asked him, I'm like, do you know what that means? And he's like, well, yeah, am I not going to see him again?
Mm.
And so I said, well, no, he's gone. And we just we just kind of kept it, and he just kind of looked at me, and it was like it was like he didn't really, understand the enormity of it at that point. It was just kind of like,
Mhm.
um, okay, well,
Like
mommy,
matter
can,
of factly,
yeah, yeah.
kind of thing. Mhm.
And he just he gave me a hug,
Mm.
and then he's just like, okay, can we keep walking? And so I'm like, okay. Um,
And and I love that you were walking. By the way, like that is something that not only works with kids sometimes, like of doing that they do
yeah,
better. And you're okay, you're the psychologist, but as a mom and as a wife too, I'd say this actually works also when you're trying to have a conversation with a husband. If you have a
yeah,
husband in your life, it's a lot of times it works better to talk when they're doing something rather than just sitting at a table, like
yeah,
at a table. So um there's something different about that moving in that heart, conversation. So that was really smart of you to take him out on a walk as you shared the news. And like you said,
yeah,
being back in nature too. Is nature your is spiritual? Is that your spiritual practice? Is it more grounding yourself with nature? Is that kind of where
yes,
you find
yeah,
okay?
yes, for
Is that
sure.
how you were brought up too, or is that what you are
No,
now finding that that's your where your soul is?
I mean, I've kind of always felt that. I just didn't really know that. I didn't really like make that bigger connection,
Hmm.
but yeah, in my breathwork practice and through my own like self-healing process, I have connected, to just like source, to my higher self, to just this I know that there's this thing bigger than me, that there's
Hmm.
this essence, there's this bigness
You,
supporting me.
you
And
yeah. Yeah, if
yeah,
like you just don't let the title itself is not what matters of what this bigness is for
right,
you. It's just
right,
the fact that
right,
you're aware of it and nature
yeah,
makes you be connected to that
yes,
bigger
definitely,
bigger power. Oh, okay. So yeah, I
definitely,
just wanted to understand because a lot of times too in conversations, if it's, people's religious backgrounds that have helped
right,
them, in their own, so with yours is the concept of nature. So I wanted to kind of just grasp that. Okay, so let's
yeah,
since I made you stop there to go back there, we had talked that that's then when you discovered then breath work. You started then working on then your creating then that for yourself using breath as your own therapy per se in your grief journey. And then what's happened then in the past year, it take us then on that journey.
yeah. So early on, I used breath work to really, what I now know was allowing me to release and heal through some of the trauma of the experience. um, I actually, one of the breath patterns that I practice and that I use with my clients is actually an activating pattern. It activates your sympathetic nervous system. And so it can actually put you into what happens a lot of times with trauma is people get stuck in this like fight or flight. I'm not going to go into like a whole lot of the science behind it, but like your
Oh,
autonomic
I'm
nervous
sure you
system.
can you can totally go to it. I'm sure that if somebody wants to listen, because if there's gonna be probably people that like if you want to share anything that has any importance, please do. Because any guest that comes up, even my own life coach when I interviewed her, she's also into
Yeah,
neuropsycho what is it again?
neuroscience is,
Neuroscience, yeah. And
yeah.
then just all the neural patterns and all that kind of stuff and how you can switch that too, but depending, the pathways. Um, that you have, how you can kind of switch how they're designed to be. So please go wherever you want to go. This is your space, Andrea.
All right. All right. So yeah, it's an activating breath pattern that stimulates or activates the sympathetic nervous system. And this is the part of the autonomic nervous system that um like kind of switches on that fight or flight response.
Mhm.
And so a lot of times when people go through a traumatic experience, it's kind of like there's many definitions of trauma and it depends on who you talk to about it. But it's people get stuck in this cycle of, we have these mechanisms for survival. Like that's the purpose, is like,
Mm-hmm.
if you're out in the woods and
When we were
something starts
cavemen, it
chasing you.
comes from,
Yeah.
yeah, it comes from that survival mode of when we were cavemen, cave women.
Yes, exactly. And so these are really important mechanisms that we have, and they can still be really helpful even now,
Mm-hmm.
if our life is actually in danger. But what
Mm-hmm.
happens a lot of times with trauma is like we go through this experience it's like too much, too soon, too fast, like for our systems to handle. And so we have this fight or flight or freeze response,
Mm.
and then we can get stuck there. We get stuck in this. So what happens in a healthy nervous system is we go into this fight or flight or freeze response to survive, and then our system goes back to like kind of like homeostasis, where it's back at its baseline levels. Everything's good. We realize we're not in danger. But with trauma, it can be so much on the system that we just get stuck there. So all of these
Mm.
stress hormones are being released all of the time, and our fight or flight system, our sympathetic nervous system, is just like constantly activated. So we think we're like detecting threat in our
All the
environment when
time.
it's not, when we're
Mm.
not really under any threat. And
Mm-hmm.
so, what this certain breathwork pattern does is it activates that part of the autonomic nervous system, that pathway, and stuff comes up. Like I found myself in those beginning stages of practicing breathwork, just really really releasing so much, just in the form of, I was really angry. I was really angry at first. And I was able to allow a lot of those feelings to surface, and to either scream or yell or cry or whatever it was I needed to do to release those feelings, so that they weren't, because trauma gets trapped in our bodies and it gets held in our bodies. And when we don't allow those things to surface, when we don't allow ourselves to express those feelings, then we're just holding on to them and we're pushing them down. And that can lead to a lot of problems down the road. And so, what I was able to do, and I truly, truly believe that this is what has helped me to get to the place where I am today. I am still healing. I'm still new on this journey for sure. And I also feel I'm also in a really good place. I'll just say that.
Mm.
And I know that going through this practice and using this practice and allowing these things to be released and not being afraid to feel those things in the early stages has really, really helped me on my journey. And so
Mm.
there
That's
are,
wonderful.
that's, and I will say, so there are these more activating patterns that you can use when practicing breath work. And there are also patterns that are specifically uh, more for like activating your parasympathetic nervous system, like the rest and digest, the ones that really put us into a deep state of relaxation and just kind of calm. So with breath work, there's really, it's just a really valuable tool for anybody to use, because we all breathe, we all have access
Yes.
to our breath. And so it's just
It's
a really,
free. It's a
yeah,
free
exactly.
right now we
um
don't have to pay for it, for the breath,
right,
for the oxygen we inhale.
right. And so we can just, what breath work is though, is it's like an conscious and intentional way of breathing. So you're essentially
Mhm.
changing your breath patterns to either to bring yourself to a certain state of being. So you can go from
Mhm.
anxious to calm using your breath.
Mhm.
You can go from um, being just really like depleted and feeling lethargic to feeling energized. You can
Energized,
go from
yeah.
having a foggy, cloudy mind to having some clarity. So
So
So there's
right
just
now that you said the energized, I just thought of Tony Robbins. I was in one of his well, he was in one of actually the events that I went to a conference also. That one actually that one was also in was that one in San Diego? And I'm trying to think. Maybe it was in Las Vegas. But anyhow, one of the conferences that I was in, which was a wellness company, but a wellness conference, but he was on stage and he was teaching us the breathe the one that you breathe like really fast when you get up and you move your arms, and that one's to
oh, yes,
energize
yes.
yourself. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
So when you said that, I'm like, oh yeah. And then I do know, of course, of the when you're trying to calm yourself down, of just the slowing down. And I remember we tell the kids when I worked with children before, like, to stand kind of like like a star. Like
Yeah.
a star, like stand like that and then just breathe, when they were kind of getting nervous or anxious and stuff like that, and just, kind of focus again. So it's amazing, yeah, what it can do. Have you used that technique of breath work then as a parent with your child, with your son?
Yeah, so I'm so glad that you asked that, because as you started to talk about like using different breath patterns with kids, my whole journey through all of this has it's so crazy how things just like come together over time and like fall into place, because that's been one, and I will get to answering your question specifically
Oh, it's
in
fine.
a
Go ahead.
minute.
Do it.
Short
As
short
long as
answer,
we
yes.
remember where we go. I'm the same. I go into all these like, whoo, love it. No,
There's
please
just so
go to
much
where
to
you need to
talk
go.
about here.
I know. It's like,
um
no, and especially you can hear the passion in your voice about it. And so when you're passionate about something, you just want to share all the
yeah,
details about it.
yeah.
So I can hear that. It's so exciting. So I'm very excited learning from you. So go ahead.
Awesome. Yeah. So the short answer to your question is yes, I have used breath work with my son. And longer answer is he has really, it comes back to this whole idea of like we all process grief differently. We all
Hmm.
um, it's really a very personal journey. And no matter, even if you're grieving the same person and the same type
Yes.
of loss and all of that, he's now 5, and I'm 36. And so there's a very
Hmm.
different, we have different life experiences and different skills and tools, and to process these things. And so one of the biggest challenges for me as a single parent and a widow is being able to hold space for my son as he processes and goes through his own journey and his own experience through grief. um, and he has had a lot of anger, just a
Hmm.
lot of big emotions. He is somebody who feels very, very big, and he and I have it's amazing because through my own journey through all of this, the tools that I've learned to help myself has helped me, not just through my own healing, but to be able to show up for him. And
Hmm.
so just to be able to hold space for him to feel his feelings in whatever way that needs to be. And so we have times where we are we'll have screaming contests because he just needs to release the anger. He just needs to release the feelings, the big feelings that he's having, and he doesn't know how to do it. And so we'll in the early stages especially, we would go in the car, go on walks, and we would just scream at the top of our lungs and just like go back and forth. And by the end of it, we were laughing because it was just like this thing. He's like, "Mom, why are you screaming? Like, this is weird. Like, what's going on?"
Hmm.
But it just became like a fun thing for us, almost like it would start out feeling really heavy and really, really hard. And then by the end of it, we would get to this point where we're just like, like we feel better. We feel better.
Hmm.
We feel lighter. We released a lot. So we would do
It's
that.
it sounds like, that duality sometimes that happens when you start crying and then all of a sudden you start
Yes.
laughing within the same
Yes.
cry, and you're like, it's that duality of emotions all in one, like a release
Yes.
of different kinds. So right now, as you were explaining, you guys screaming and then laughing, I just thought of that. That's pretty much like how I recognize it as more in the crying and laughter component of that duality.
Yeah,
Okay, go ahead.
certainly. And also we would just do things like, punch a pillow,
Mm,
or just be able to release and be able to feel, because that is something I am so dedicated to as a parent. I have been ever since I've been a mom, but I definitely am now after everything that has happened in our lives. Is like, my son gets to express himself. He gets to feel his emotions, and I am going to be here to support that 100%, because I'm
mm,
working with adults as an emotional wellness coach or self-love coach, and through the breathwork facilitation that I'm doing, who don't feel safe to feel their feelings, who don't feel
mhm,
safe to express themselves. And so they're just holding all of this stuff in. And I I want him to know from a young age that that's what emotional resilience is like,
yes.
we have awareness, and we notice, okay, I'm feeling this thing in my body. This is anger, this is sadness, or this is whatever it is. And I get to allow myself to feel that thing, and I get to release that thing. Um,
I think this is so interesting. Sorry, but if I pause, especially
sure.
when you started off saying that you used to be somebody that would run from
Yes.
your
Yes.
emotions and you would numb it in any way possible to not have to deal with how you felt. This
Hmm.
whole 180 of who you are and who you became, especially from becoming a mom, thank goodness, like that you
I
had
know.
gone through that. Can you imagine if you had not discovered that and then experienced what you did, of the death of your husband, and then having to then not only navigate your own emotions, but then helping your child when you didn't even know how to navigate your own. Like, what a beautiful, oh gosh, what a beautiful timing, that you had in your
Yes.
life to discover that. And in the and when you did, like what a beautiful gift that you
Yes.
were able to have those tools prior to, because so many people don't, and you didn't have them for a while, either.
Right.
And so anyway, sorry, I just got like I was just I think it's just I see the beauty in those little gifts in life. So
Yeah.
as I'm listening to your story, so sorry. So back
No, it's
to
okay.
how then, so helping your son with the emotional intelligence, emotional resilience, as you called it, expressing his emotions just like you do with your own clients. So what are some of the techniques then, aside from screaming? What other things do you do with breath work with him to help him navigate his emotions?
Yeah, so we will definitely do like just the whole like pausing and just taking a deep
Mhm.
breath before we respond, which is something like developmentally, like he's just kind of going through anyways, like regardless of our history and the things that we've been through. But just
I
to
still have to learn that, by the
Yeah,
way. I
I
still have
know.
to learn.
I
I still have to
know.
learn the pause. I do not know where the pause button is. I'm like
Oh.
the feisty respond right away instead of
Mhm.
give me a minute. And that's why then get into
Yes.
trouble, because you say what you really did not intend. You say it based on emotion and not because you breathed
Yeah.
breathed
Yeah,
in
like it's
before.
it's reacting instead of responding. It's just
Exactly.
like, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Oh, of course. Like so many of the that's why I'm so grateful though, because so many of these things that like I said, I'm working with adults and my own
Mhm.
self, not just my clients, but in my
Yeah.
own journey of just being a human, really.
Mhm.
I do these things myself, and I it's different, when we have the awareness, of like, okay, I just totally freaked out about that thing,
Mhm.
instead of allowing myself, I responded with my emotions instead of
Mhm.
just taking a moment to just pause and breathe and then respond. And so these things that's why it's beautiful, because these things that I'm using with clients and on myself, I get to teach my son at 5 years old, and I get to
Mhm.
model for him at 5 years old. Like, this is what healthy emotionality looks like. This is what it means to take emotional responsibility. Um,
Mm.
and and I just, like you were saying a minute ago about the duality, like, I remember the moment that I realized it's okay for me to feel gratitude for where my life is right now and
Mm-hmm.
still grieve the loss of my husband. Like,
Yes.
I get to feel both. I get to like, it's not like I'm letting go of that thing, or it's not like that thing is not part of me or that my past, but it's like I get to feel the pain and the enormity of that loss and hold that while I simultaneously hold this gratitude and joy and like deep presence that I have for my life now
Mm.
as it is.
That is so important that you say that, because a lot of people sometimes are not willing to allow themselves to experience joy. Like you use
Yeah,
the word joy, experience joy because they feel
right.
guilty um, of having those kind of emotions when they've had somebody, important in their life die.
Yeah.
And it doesn't take, I like you said very clearly, it doesn't take away from that. And I always ask this in my podcast. I'm like, what are you grateful for having gone through this experience? Again, it not taking away from the fact that that was something hard, and it's not trying to diminish that at all. It's just saying like where we are and who we become and the growth we experience sometimes is based on all these different hardships that we go through. And like it's hard, but it's also beautiful at the same time, that we
Yes.
we 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 just, it's kind of like a seed kind of breaking through the shell and the earth and all that stuff. Here it is in this little comfort of it being just a seed, and that little
Yeah.
plant having to go through all that to then go through the earth, and that to then come out and bloom and become this beautiful flower. um it's just part of it. Even just with birth, right? It's
Yeah.
it's a
Yes.
treacherous journey to
Yes.
then have this a child, come into this painful and yet
Yeah.
beautiful, so so
Yeah.
it's
And
okay to
that,
have those dualities.
yeah, and it's also like, I actually just shared this in a group the other day, that it's like, you you my message was like, don't let your pain steal your joy, because it's
Yes.
like we and I experienced this early on. I've come, it is still not, has not been very long ago that I went through this loss, or that happened. But I early on, I remember feeling, it was just a few months after my husband had passed. We were driving, me and my son were driving down the road. It was a beautiful day outside. Like, I was just like, really, I was feeling, there was just all of these feelings, and I felt so
Mm,
alive in my body. I felt joy. I felt happiness for like the first time
mm,
since that terrible day. And immediately my ego was like, what are you doing? You don't get to feel
mm,
happy. You don't get to be okay. Do you not remember what just happened? Do you not remember that now you're a single parent and all of these things? Like, how are you ever going
mhm,
to do this? And this, like, my inner critic and the negative self-talk just came in so fast.
mm,
And that's what and I know that day, and I anchored into my pain. I immediately, it was so quick, and I just anchored back into my pain. And what I've learned through this process, and through everything that I've learned, through going through the coaching certification, and through going through the breathwork facilitation stuff, and working with my own clients, is we get to, like, I planted a seed. It planted a seed that day. Like, when I felt those feelings of joy, when I felt hope in the midst of all of the pain, there was a seed planted. And over time, I would allow myself to experience a little bit more and a little bit more.
mm,
And now I will allow myself to experience days, weeks, maybe even longer than that, of just, if I feel joy, I'm going to let it be there.
Mm-hmm.
Because like we had just said, we don't, just because we've been through something difficult, we're still here. Like, we're still
Mm-hmm.
here. We still get to live our lives. We still get to experience joy. We still get to be happy. And like you said, it doesn't take away from the fact that we're still grieving the loss of somebody, that we're
Yes, it's
still
just looking different.
walking
It's
through
just
that.
Yeah, and it's reflecting differently too. Like it might be coming out in a different way. Like even in that joy, you could still be grieving even
Yes,
within that
right,
joy, because
right.
you could be joyful yet at the same time like being like, wow, what was your husband's name? What, by
Brett.
the way, Andrea? Brett.
Brett.
So
Hmm.
wow, Brett, you would love this sunset. Oh my gosh,
Yeah,
Brett, like like having even like oh gosh, Brett, like, like those moments of remembering
yeah,
our loved ones, even in that joy and in connecting with nature. Like what you just said about nature, I too find so much connection in nature, even just with um when I think of my sister or my mom, who are the two closest in my life that have passed away. I also had a miscarriage, but in terms of those aspects like that, I see in nature like certain things that just remind me, and I just talked I just talk to them, or I
yeah,
just makes me think of them and brings me joy rather than sadness.
yeah.
um so that is just beautiful. Now, when you start feeling that you're about to maybe spiral into anxiety, like, do you have certain ways of catching yourself prior to it happening, that you can switch it with your breath? Like, does that make
Mm.
sense what I'm saying? Like, are
Hmm.
you already so in tune with your own, patterns, that you're able to start changing your breath prior to going through what I mean? Like, yeah, I don't know, if anxiety attack or things
Yeah,
like that. You know what I mean?
yeah. So actually, yes and no. I mean,
Hmm.
there are times where I will be able to it's really just about awareness. It's like
Yes. Okay.
just noticing, like, when I'm feeling just kind of like overwhelmed, I'll start to notice just getting really like agitated and frustrated very easily, and just having very little patience.
Mm,
um, and so I'll start to notice it. The difficult thing is that sometimes the breath is enough. It depends on what it is that's trying to come up. Sometimes I need to have a bigger release than that. So that might mean just allowing myself to cry for however long it takes. Um, and it also, it so it just depends. And so with being a single mother, sometimes sometimes I
mm,
can ask for support from like my mom or other people in my life that have helped me in different ways, like with my son,
mhm,
to be like, hey, can you take Oliver for a little bit? um, I need to have some time or some space or whatever. And when I can
mhm,
do that, when I have that help, then I'm able to kind of go through my process and allow that stuff to be released. And then I will feel better, and it won't go into like a full blown panic attack, or just like complete like stress and overwhelm that's just kind of like overtaking me. But then there's times where I don't have that. Or maybe I haven't been. I know when we were getting on the call today, you were talking about how important it is for you to have your routine, just because it impacts how you show up in your day. And I think that's true
mhm,
for everybody. And so if I've kind of been neglecting my self care, I haven't moved my body, I haven't done my breath work, I haven't been keeping up with my normal like meditation practices and stuff, then sometimes I don't catch myself, and
mm.
I do go there. So it just really
It just
depends.
depends. Yeah.
Yeah.
You said something so important, and it was the aspect of also asking for help. Now, let's
Yeah.
talk about that a little bit too in your grief journey. Your family then lives, you have your mom then nearby. was she was big part of your support system then? It has been in this journey?
Yeah. So my mom's always been a big part of my support system. And definitely has been since Brett died.
Mhm.
She helps a lot. Me and my son actually, I made a very difficult decision, about 5 months after Brett died, to sell our house. It just, I was like holding on to it. It was this thing that I was just holding on
Mm,
to because it felt like that last thing that I had that was like keeping me safe almost. But ultimately I decided to sell that house. And so when I did that, me and my son moved in with my mom for just a little bit.
mhm,
And I needed that so much at that point in my life, because I would have time, I would have those moments that I talked about a minute ago where I would just like
mhm,
know, I could feel it in my body, like building up and building up. And I'm like, I know I just need to go. I just need to go on
mhm.
a run. I just need to go be by myself.
You need time out, time out.
Yeah.
I used to get myself in the closet and my kids would still be knocking on my door. My kids
I
are
know.
they're 15 months apart, and so they'd be little and I'd be like, "No, leave me
Yeah.
here. Mommy needs a time out." Because if
Yes.
I did not give myself a time out, it would end up, affecting them. So I'm like,
Yeah.
"No, please." So I
Yeah.
understand.
Yeah. And so that
So then
was,
she helped you, yeah, during that
yeah.
time.
And so she would be there. And so I could just say, hey, I need to go for an hour or whatever. And
Mhm.
so I could just do that. Um, and so that was really helpful. And then we now we have our own place, just me and Oliver, and it's beautiful and wonderful. And she helps out still. Like she'll pick him up from school, from his preschool sometimes. They have special like Oliver grandma dates and things that they
Mm.
do together, and they just have a really beautiful relationship. So
That's wonderful.
um
That's beautiful.
yes.
I'm so glad that you have her. And again, that you are one of those people that have realized the importance of asking for help when needed. Now, let's dive into your practice a little bit more. And then also how this aspect of also helping others has helped you in your journey.
Yeah. Yeah. So as far as my practice,
Mhm.
what were you?
With your breath work, with what you do in terms of now being a breath work coach,
Oh,
your
okay.
clients by helping others, how is that been an impact in your own healing journey?
Yeah. So I think just being able to, just having come, kind of full circle, like we had talked about before. It's like I really started out very much from this like logical, like I'm just gonna problem solve and I'm just gonna fix things, like just using my mind and using my head. And I and just kind of very much in like
In the
a,
perfectionist still mode, where you're still in
yes,
that recovering
yes,
perfectionist
yeah.
mode.
And so just very much I came from that to avoiding all of the things
Mhm.
and not allowing myself to feel things, to a place where I didn't feel like I could avoid things any longer. Like it was such a difficult thing to go through that, like, I really truly came to the point of like there's nowhere else I can turn but inward. I can't run from
Mm,
these things anymore.
mm,
And so me being able to go through that experience myself, it gives me this like very real, like lived experience, way that I can help, or like a relatability that I can help other people to be like, I do have a certification. However, I don't think, I mean, it's really my lived experience and me using the things that I've learned through the certification that's like, I'm doing this work alongside you. And
mhm,
that has just shown, has been proven to just be really powerful for the people that are attracted to me, for the people that reach out to me that want to work with me. It's like, man, I can, something that you're doing is working. Like, what is this? Like, what are you
mhm.
doing? What are you Like, how are you doing this? And so I have had people reach out to me that have been through a similar trauma as mine, which has been really powerful for me to be able to help people that are farther along on their grief journey than I am, but they didn't have the tools that I
Yes.
have. And so for me to just kind of see that, and also to be able to, it just further hits home the reality that, like, I'm not alone. Like, there are
Mm-hmm.
other people, so many other people out there that have gone through the same thing or something similar to what I have gone through, and they're having a hard time, and I have these things that I can show them and guide them through so that they can do the work and get through the thing. So that has been really powerful. And then just being able to see the impact of breath work, and how so often we just kind of like rush through our days, and we walk around life living on in autopilot, and we're just not really being intentional about how we show up or how we're feeling or how we're taking care of ourselves. And so to witness somebody just lie down on their mat for an hour and breathe with intention, it is so impactful. And all they're doing is changing their breath. And it's just like, just feeling, going through the process of my own life and then witnessing the power of it in other people. I just, I don't, there's not words for it. Like, I have a
So
hard time.
fulfilling, so rewarding, so
Yeah.
rewarding.
Yeah.
Yeah, very rewarding. That so now how would somebody be able to work with you? And I will put your website and your Instagram and the in the show notes, but how would somebody be able to work with you, and does it have to be in person? Of course, nowadays with
Yeah.
everything being online or over the phone or whatever, what is the process?
Yeah. So I have a website. So they could go to my website and just kind of see the different services that I offer. I have one-to-one coaching containers, one that is 3 months long, one that is 6 months long. I do, for coaching, like people to commit to at least 3 months, just because
Mm-hmm.
you can't really get
It's a
much
practice.
done.
It's a
And yeah,
practice. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's
definitely
a practice. You're
a
not going to
practice.
get it from one day.
Right. So I have the 3 month container, 6 month container for coaching everything. I do have one client that is local that I meet with in person right now.
Hmm.
Um, but most of what I do is done over Zoom. So we're able to see each other and we're able to hear each other. And it has really worked out great that way. And then for breath work, I will do one-to-one sessions. I can do group sessions. So I could do like partner sessions or families, or really, really just, there's a lot of things that we can do with breath work.
Okay, so
And
it's different.
so,
So the first one was the coaching component, and this
yes.
one is the breath work.
Yep.
Okay. So
Yep.
the 3 month and the 6 month are your coaching packages, and
Hmm.
then the breath work, it just depends
On what
on
they
the
want.
dynamics. It could be in a group setting or okay, in individuals. That's
Yep.
wonderful. And again, I'll put that in the but you could just actually just go ahead and say your website, but I'll still put it in the show notes.
Okay. And it's actually AndreaFreemyer.com.
Okay. All right.
So
Easy
super
enough.
easy
Perfect.
with that.
That's awesome. And now, is there something I did not ask you that you still would want to share? Um, yeah, is there something I did not say? Like ask you that you're like, I'm really wanting to still share this with the audience because I don't want you to like hang up because of course it will still happen that there's like, man, I didn't say about this part and I didn't. So is there
Mm,
something else that was missing or that you want to give as tips or thoughts to the listeners?
I guess it would just be, so there's a quote that I love that I like to share.
Mhm.
A trauma specialist said, "Trauma creates change you don't choose, and healing is about creating change you do choose."
Mm.
And it was really truly like this shift, like the making the decision really every day to not be a victim of my circumstances, that has been so empowering for me. And like shifting the narrative to like, instead of like, why did this happen to me? What am I going to do? Like just that victim mindset to like, no, I get to choose. I get to
Mhm.
feel, and in doing so, I get to heal. And like, I just think that there's just so much power in that. I think that there's just knowing that we truly do have a choice, and we are
Mhm.
co-creators of this life. And so even when really difficult, hard things have happened to us, we get to choose where we go. We get to choose what we make of that and how we move forward. So, and
Oh,
then just like
that
what
is
I said
perfect.
before, don't let your pain steal your joy,
Mhm.
is
No,
huge too.
so many. So I've written a few of those. Like, don't I wrote that? I wrote shifting the narrative. I go. So then I'm like, I have some ideas as to what to put as the title of the podcast. Which, by the way, is usually the hardest part of my whole
Mm.
process. Is like choosing the title for the podcast.
Oh
Because
yeah.
so you've given me a few options there as what you've said in your own words, and I'm just so grateful again, not only that you reached out, but also for everything you've taught us. I say us because I know there's more than just me listening afterwards after we finish recording, that you've taught us in this interview with the importance of breath work and the importance of being able to be present with our emotions, and again that we do get to choose what happens next, really, in
Yeah.
our life. Even though we didn't get to choose what happened to us, we get to choose how we react to it. And I always tell that
Yes.
even to my kids. You don't have a choice as to what somebody did to you, but you do have a choice as to what you do, about it, or things like that. When they go through their own life, little things in school and this or that. And so we always
Yes.
have a choice. So thank you once again, Andrea, and I look forward to continue getting to know you, because it's only the beginning here with
Yes.
this podcast. So thank you once again.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you again so much for choosing to listen today. I hope that you can take away a few nuggets from today's episode that can bring you comfort in your times of grief. If so, it would mean so much to me if you would rate and comment on this episode. And if you feel inspired in some way to share it with someone who may need to hear this, please do so. Also, if you or someone you know has a story of grief and gratitude that should be shared so that others can be inspired as well, please reach out to me. And thanks once again for tuning in to Grief, Gratitude, and the Gray in Between podcast. Have a beautiful day.